This is Kate at the Library of Whispers, and today we're going to take another look at this gorgeous book, Britain's Tudor Maps, County by County, by John Speed. This is one of my favourite books. It's absolutely gorgeous. It was sent to me subject to the governor of the Isle of Wight. The islands were never incorporated into the system of English local government, and they had kept their own patois, described by Speed as French, though after a corrupt manner, and their own system of law based on the customary laws of Normandy, without any or little intermixture. These many hundred survey made in 1595 by Thomas Durham. So you can just see Ireland here. There is Dublin down there, and then tip of Scotland, and then of course England here. And then just a little bit of Wales. So this is now the Wirral Peninsula. No, actually, that's wrong. No, this is still Wales. It's just the way the map has been set out. And this is now the Wirral Peninsula, I think. But it doesn't look like that in the modern map. And then we have a map of Wales. Yeah. This is Anglesey, North Wales, and obviously South Wales. The Irish Sea. And up here is the Wirral Peninsula sticking out there. Shropshire, Herefordshire. So this is England. And then there are pictures on the left and right hand sides of different towns in Wales. So we have Beaumaris Castle, which actually is in Anglesey. Carnarvon Castle. Oh, so these are all castles. Yeah, on this side. Harlech. Cardigan. Pembroke. Carmarthen. And this side, I think. Yeah, so these are towns. Cardiff. Brecknock. I don't recognise that. Radnor. Montgomery, Flint, and Denbigh. Okay, so I'm going to read a little bit for you. When Christopher Saxton published his atlas in 1579, he had included maps for Wales, but where it suited him. Saxton had covered regions, not counties, and he had used a scale which had varied considerably from map to map. Both practices had been adversely criticised. George Owen of Henley's remarked that the combination of Brecconshire, Cardiganshire, Carmarthenshire and Radnorshire forced them so near together, thrusting one town upon another, and the Muster commissioners complained about the disproportionate size of the areas assigned to them on account of the failure to take differences of scale into account. In the theatre, Speed met these objections. He not only had a separate map for each county, but was more consistent in scale. Moreover, he had the sense to realise that his solutions to critics' objections to Saxton's set themselves called for a regional subject to diseases excepting certain agues at some times, which are occasioned by the fogs and misty exhalations which arise from the sea, with no land as high as 1,000 feet, and the greater part less than 400 feet, with extensive marshland but little woodland. Anglesey was dependent upon grazing, cattle and sheep, with some cultivation of wheat, oats and is St. Winifred Well. Here. Glamorganshire. Town map of Cardiff, which is the capital of Wales. Llandaff. Merionethshire. Montgomeryshire. Pembrokeshire. It's a town map of Pembroke. St. David's. These look like coats of arms. Radnorshire. And then we're on to Scotland. The Kingdom of Scotland. Yeah. So this is Ireland. The top of Northern Ireland. Part of England. Berwick-upon-Tweed. Hebrides. Okay, I'm going to read a little bit of this. Unlike England, Wales and Ireland, there is only one map for Scotland in Speed's Theatre. So, it's where all these maps originally were published. The reason for this is twofold. Firstly, the project seems originally to have been conceived in the early 1590s when the separate kingdoms of Scotland was to have been excluded, but delays in production, partly on account of the decision to link the theatre directly with the history of Great Britain, which, despite its title, only covered England, and the union of the crowns in 1603 meant that Speed had to modify his original plan. As with the history, the modifications to the theatre were kept to a minimum, rather than further delaying publication. Secondly, Speed knew of the Scotsman Timothy Pont's work in surveying Scotland. To have extended the theatre to include maps for Scotland similar to those for England, Wales and Ireland would have been to duplicate Pont's effort, even if cartographic aspects were differently emphasised by the two men. The map of Scotland is based on Gerardus Mercator's earlier map of the kingdom dated 1595, and not surprisingly it reflects slightly different cartographic criteria from the majority of maps in the theatre. For example, the regions shown are not counties, as Scotland was only in the process of being divided into shires along English lines. But the